phone is on the charger again. I always do that with this phone. And I'm using my standards, you can see, so it's a better view than the previous live stream of today. So again, I'm going to wait 5 minutes to give people the time to come in, as I always do. When you're here, please let me know in the live chat, please. Thank you very much. I'll wait. Today's topic will be, don't speak ill of the dead. It's a phrase often used in the English language, both in American English as well as in British English. And it comes from ancient Greece. So it's a Greek philosophy, never speak ill of the dead. And it predates the Greek Empire, but it's still a philosophy that the Greeks firmly believed in. The Romans, who were extensions of the Greek civilization, which overtook the Greek civilization, also believed in it. And in the Western world, don't speak ill of the dead has become this unspoken, unwritten rule you abide by. Again, if you're here, let me know in the live chat you're here. I'm going to wait 4 more minutes before I begin teaching. Thank you very much. Again, if you're here, let me know in the live chat that you're here. Thank you very much. Let's see, 2.5 more minutes before we can begin this teaching. If you're here, let me know in the live chat if you can hear me clearly, please. Thank you very much. Okay. So 1 more minute before I begin teaching. Okay. All right, 15 seconds. Good. Don't speak ill of the dead. It's a form of courtesy and civility taught to people. And it's not only in the English speaking languages that is taught, it's taught almost worldwide. Why? Because don't speak ill of the dead is an ancient Greek philosophy that the world took over. So the ancient Greeks, both before and after the Greek Empire, they believed firmly in never speaking ill of the dead. When the Roman Empire was established, they continued this philosophy, and this philosophy continues till this day. Many people who are believers or who claim to follow Christ also have this philosophy, don't speak ill of the dead. And they have no idea that this attitude is not even biblical. Look, even if something is biblical, if it's not Christ-centered, we shouldn't follow it. I already explained that. If something is biblical but not Christ-centered, we should not follow it. Something can be recorded in the Bible as a piece of history. That doesn't mean just because in the Bible we have to follow it. It's biblical because it's recorded in the Bible, but it doesn't mean you have to agree with it. So even if it was biblical, is it Christ-centered? Now look, this phrase, don't speak ill of the dead, or another way to say that, only speak good things about dead people, it's a method used by pagans to maintain peace and ease in society. Because one thing you need to remember, worldlings want to flee. Worldlings want to escape. And when they can't escape, they feel entitled to escalate. That's how worldlings are. Escaping and escalating. And often when they escalate, people die. But here's the thing, if someone passed away and you keep on speaking ill of the individual, you will expose yourself as well as the community that the community is defective. Let me explain. Let's say you have this Greek village somewhere in ancient Greece. Okay? And it's located near Thessalonica. You have this Greek village. Around 300 people live there. And one day, everyone in the village decides to knock out this male singer who has this flamboyant lifestyle. So they gang up around the guy. They all beat him up and they hang him afterwards. Now everyone is at ease for the coming months. Whatever frustration was bothering people is all out. But here's the thing. The scapegoating ritual worked. So everyone unloaded their frustration on the victim. That's why they all are at ease. So if anyone comes and talks bad about the victim, it will disrupt the ease that the scapegoat mechanism just brought. And then they would go for another victim. So it's a way to actually prevent further escalation. Because here's the thing, it's not only has to do with scapegoating. If someone passes away, and all our bodies are mortal, so all our bodies will expire one day, we know that. If you pass away, or let's say someone you know passed away, and I'm not talking about you, if someone passed away, there's still relatives that are left behind, that are still alive. And if those relatives hear you talking bad about the one who passed away, they may develop animosity towards you. And that will haunt you. And strangers even, who hear you talk dirty about someone who passed away, and they hear about the relatives being hurt, they may see you as a bad guy and will decide to take it out on you. So, not speaking ill of the dead was also a way to prevent yourself from being endangered. Okay? So, those are the sociological reasons not to speak ill of the dead. However, there is a spiritual reason why the ancient Greeks also taught never to speak ill of the dead. What was the spiritual reason why the ancient Greeks taught their public never to speak ill of the dead? I'll tell you why. And it's very simple. Anytime you speak ill of someone, you are generating negative tension towards that individual. If a whole group does it, the individual is on the psychic attack, wherever they are on the earth. Now, if the individual is far away, the psychic attacks will be less, but if they are close, psychic attacks will be more intense. But anyway, when you speak ill of someone, then you are invoking harm on someone. If the individual is alive, the individual will experience the harm. But if the individual is passed away, then what happens to the negative tension that's generated? It will float around in the community. It will, because if the individual is alive, the negative tension will hit the individual and everyone else is spared from it. Well, unless you're close to the victim, then you will experience the victimization of the victim also. So if you speak ill of someone and they're not alive, you are generating waste in the climate that has no target to lie upon. And before you know it, more people speak ill of that dead individual. And what do you get? You'll have a dark cloud above the community with no victim to crash upon. So you are actually setting up your own community for harm. That is what happens when you speak ill of the dead. You're generating waste that will eventually crash on the community you live in. And you don't know how the crash will affect anyone. So nobody wants to experience sudden tragedy because there's waste that crash on the community. So that's why the ancient Greeks taught their people to not speak ill of the dead. Why? Because the negative tension has no target to afflict. So if it has no target to afflict, it will linger around and it will crash on the people. That is the reason why they're taught not to speak ill of the dead. It's very simple. Now, we are believers. We walk by faith. We follow the risen Lord. We know that physical death is something that will be reversed by Christ when he returns. Okay? So, we know that physical death will be reversed, but here's the thing. When you speak ill of someone that passed away, and I'm not going to repeat it for those that haven't captured it yet, you are generating psychic waste that will crash on the community because the psychic waste has no target to lay upon. And when everyone does that, you'll have a very toxic, unhealthy climate locally, and that will harm the animals, it will harm the human beings, it will harm life itself. So to keep ease, you just don't speak good things of those that pass away. Now, hey, Justin, thank you for being here. Elaine, thank you for being here. So, don't speak ill of the dead. Again, it's an ancient Greek philosophy. It's a pagan philosophy. Now, even though this philosophy is not biblical, let's ask, is it Christ-centered? And here's what we get into. What's the purpose of speaking ill of someone that passed away? Let me know in the live chat. Why do you think people speak ill of someone that passed away? Just let me know in the live chat what you think. I'll give you 2 minutes to respond. If not many responses, I will continue earlier. 2 minutes. Why do people speak ill of those that passed away? There are no wrong answers, just tell me what's on your mind. I'll wait till it appears in the live chat. Why do you think people speak ill of the dead? Okay. Someone said to gain some type of status or clout to destroy life's work. Yeah, that's reasonable. If someone was a famous singer who achieved a lot in life and now they pass away, and this individual has a legacy that people look up to, and you, because you did not achieve anything in your life, you just want you want to achieve by destroying someone else's achievement, then you can speak ill of the dead. And there are people who do that. But people see very clearly that you only really speak ill of someone that passed away because the individual is not there to defend himself or herself. Because the individual would be alive, the individual could easily expose you. So that's one reason why people do it. However, as Elaine made plain, perhaps because of what they did or how they lived. Now, one thing we need to understand here, not everyone that passes away was good. That means not everyone that lived on the earth looked for solutions. Some people turned into reprobates during their lifetime. Some people became worse and worse the longer they lived. Some people committed a lot of crime, a lot of dirt during their lifetime. And they never repented, they never looked for solutions, they never made amends, and they always felt entitled to will whatever they will, and they always had excuses for it. Let's say that let's say you're at a funeral, okay? And the man that passed away was a 90-year-old man. It's a 90-year-old man, and he has great-grandchildren also attend the funeral. But later, you find out that one of the children of that man, a 50-year-old man, is not present. And this 50-year-old man, you think, why isn't he present at his father's funeral? Then when you talk to him, you're shocked. You hear stories of how when this man was a little boy, that his father used to scream at him, throw objects at him, suggest harm onto him, saying things as nothing good will come from you, you're just a little loser, just this and that, look at how ugly you are. And then when you look at that child's life, he went through years of depression in his teenage years and his young adult life. He even was addicted to drugs for a while. It took him a while to get off the drugs and to recover. He was almost stabbed to death several times when he had a drug addiction. So you realize that this child was set up for a hard life. He was set up for doom by that parent. And all the other siblings were older, allowed it to happen, including the mother. Including the village knew that the man was out of his mind, but they just allowed it to happen. Because nobody wanted to deal with the bitterness of that man. So they just thought, you know what, the man has an outlet, name is his family, so let it be. So the community harmed that young boy. He was the scapegoat of the community. And when he turned into a drug addict later on, it was something he was never proud of, something he wanted to get out of. People said, you see, people use it as validation for how bad they mistreated him. And none of his siblings, nor his parents, nor the community he grew up in ever apologized nor made amends for setting him up for such a hard life. Now, that man did not go to the funeral because he made plain unto you, I have nothing to do there. If I'm there, I cannot stand people telling what type of great man he was, how loving he was. And I'm thinking, what? If he was so loving, why didn't he repent of how he was treating me? If he was so loving, why didn't he become a better person? If he was that great, and here's the thing, he wasn't that great. And all those other children and the relatives knew what happened and they enabled it. But here's the thing, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they think that that grandpa or great-grandpa was this great, loving, kind man. And their grief is they're grieving the loss of something one good. So it would be quite shocking and painful for the children and grandchildren to realize that the individual that was so charming and kind towards them, in their childhood was really a monster. And this is the reason why the family did not even invite that one sibling. There was a scapegoat. Now, that sibling has a reason to speak ill of that reprobate father of his that passed away, rightfully so. The reprobate father set him up for a very hard life, and he almost died multiple in his young years. Where was the empathy, sympathy, and consideration towards that young man when he was living on the streets, being as an addict, overwhelmed by psychological stress of his childhood trauma? Where was the empathy and sympathy of society? It was never there. People took advantage of him when he was in an vulnerable state. So this man knows very well how the world is. And he knows very well who set him up for that existence, where he almost died multiple times on the streets. That's why he knows he can speak ill of that, but he doesn't do it. Why? Because he realizes by speaking ill of that reprobate, he is keeping the negativity around, and that won't do any good. He is just relieved that the man is gone and is not able to cause harm anymore. Now, there's another reason why someone may speak ill of the dead, based on the example I just gave on to you. Because they were really bad and horrible people. Now look, speaking ill of the dead can be in two forms. As a form of slander, because you just want to smack someone, even though they're not around to defend themselves. Or it can be that someone is still bitter about what someone did to them when they were still alive. Both cases are wrong. If you're bitter because what someone else did, you're now in negativity, spreading pollutions. You're now endangering yourself and others, so you need to repent. What the individual did, the individual can't undo. They can't take back their actions nor their words. You need to find a way to heal and move on. That doesn't take the individual off the hook. Nor, but here's the thing, it's not just that individual you need to be bitter, as you should be bitter also at the community that enabled the individual. And that's the interesting thing. When people get bitter at someone, they often get bitter at only the individual, not about the whole community that enabled it. Because it's easier to focus all your pain on one individual than to face the fact that the community itself was in on it. But okay, speaking ill of the dead, as I mentioned before in the beginning of this live stream, is an ancient Greek philosophy. It's pagan. Okay, just because it's pagan doesn't mean it cannot contain any practical and valuable information for us. Pagans are quite smart. Pagans are quite intelligent. So pagans have valuable things to say from time to time. However, they have a cyclical philosophy that goes against Christ. And that's what we don't agree with. Look, pagans would be very great believers if they would turn to Christ. But the thing is, they're stuck in the cyclical philosophy of theirs. Look, when someone is alive, we as saints, that means also believers, we should make efforts to reach out to someone. We should pray for we should decree life on other people so that they remain alive. And as long as they remain alive, there's a chance for them to repent and to become better. That's what we do. Even people are narcissistic and self-destructive, we do it. What I tell you, Rashid, decree life on the reprobate, listen, Christ wants life and abundance on the earth. If the reprobate self-destruct and they die before their time because things backfire, that's on them. But apart from that, from our part, we decree life. Okay? And there are times God himself will take someone away from the earth when they're way too dangerous. As he did with Ananias and Sapphira, as he did with King Herod. That happens. But that's God doing, as a sovereign Lord, intervening from time to time. Apart from that, we are in the business of life and abundance, not death and destruction. The reprobate are all into death and destruction. So when that backfires on them, it backfires. But apart from that, our business is life and abundance. Okay? If they insist on self-destruction and they will die before the time, that's not on us. But this thing, our attitude is we focus on people when they are alive. When they pass away, it's finished. When they pass away, there is nothing we as saints can do about it anymore. except learning from it so that we can do better with other people. The only thing we can do with the dead is to learn from what happened. So we must learn from history so that history does not repeat itself or rhyme itself in the future. So it is valuable to examine history, absolutely. Not because you are in the past, but because history is as a cycle. It rhymes and repeats itself in later generations. And just like Solomon said, Solomon was a pagan, by the way, and don't even Christ himself did not endorse Solomon, but that's just like Solomon said, it's not new under the sun. So history is just a set of conflicts repeating itself. So it's good to know about history so you know what's about to come. Look, if someone was quite horrible when they were alive, if they were horrible human beings, hell-bent, haters of God, and they're gone, that means that a dangerous individual is removed from the earth. Okay? Because the longer they would remain alive, the more harm they would have caused. So if they're gone, of course, it's going to be relief if someone is gone, but that should never be something to rejoice about. There should be a rejoicement that danger is gone, but we shouldn't rejoice about someone else's ruin. We don't do that. Even unbelievers don't do that because they realize it's not the right thing to do. But understand the following. When someone was wicked and they pass away, we know that individual will be resurrected and he will end up in the lake of fire. It's not a good thing, but hey, that is the way the Heavenly Father keeps heaven and earth safe, okay? By removing the contamination away from the rest of the human species. So that individual that's wicked that passed away, they persisted in ruin, so they become a contamination to our species. So at resurrection, they have to be removed. Okay? If someone was truly bad, truly negative, and truly a menace to our species, then admit it. There's a difference between slander and actually admitting if someone was really bad. If someone was really bad, just admit it. But even if it was truly bad, don't go into meditating on it, because then it turns into slander. Let me give an example. If someone has a short temper, but apart from that, individual wants to work on himself, but people are so offended by a short temper that they keep murmuring, complaining about him. And eventually, they'll make up accusations against him. That's slander, right over there. But if they firmly admit this guy has a short temper and that's not very well, he has hurt us so multiple times because of it, we are in pain. If they admit it, they admit it. And now they admit it, now we can look for a solution, how to deal with it in a constructive way. When someone has passed away, there's no way to reconcile relationships anymore. So we admit, okay, this individual passed away. It was not the best type of individual that lived. You know what? Let's start this individual's life and help people enable the individual, and let us not enable people to turn out like that monster. If the individual who passed away was a monster, admit it. You may not admit it at someone's funeral, because that may cause a lot of unnecessary troubles in here and now, but at least admit it. And here's something that a lot of believers do wrong. When someone who passed away was a bad individual, we tend not to admit it. And let me tell you why that's a trap. If the individual was very bad, I don't mean just some flaws here and there. If they were truly evil people and they passed away, they caused harm for the next that will be felt for at least 2 or 3 more generations. Because after the second generation, people tend to forget about what happened. They caused generational harm that will later on the earth, now that they're gone. We as saints need to deal with the harm that they've left behind. We need to be going to prayer, decrees, and declarations to deal with what they have done so that we can rectify what they've done in the here and now, using the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what we ought to do. But what happens is that evil people die. Well, we all have mortal bodies. And the harm is left behind. And then you have believers who come out of families where harm is lingering around for generations, and now they go to church, and now they have to pray against generational curses. But hold on a minute. Why are those generational curses even there? It is because when the evil individual passed away, people did not examine their lives and deal with the effect of their lives. Look, we all began as a spermatosis that fertilized the egg cell in a woman. We were all developed into a fetus, and we were all born out of a vagina. All of us. If you can't handle that topic, please, you need help. We all came out of a vagina, all of us. We all were tiny, we were all vulnerable babies who couldn't do anything. We were all shaped by the environment. Some people were shaped in a very traumatic way, others were shaped in a more practical way and more loving way. But once we turned into teenagers, into our young adolescent years, now we have options to look for help and to get better when necessary. So we get options to look for healing and to look for better. Some people want better and they end up healed and they end up serving Christ. Others turn into reprobates. Now, that people will turn into reprobates is not something we can stop. There are people that are going to turn into reprobates. There will be evil and stupidity on the earth when Christ returns. We know that. However, we can, as believers, limit the impact of reprobates, and that is what we should do. So if a reprobate passes away, we admit the individual was a reprobate. It's very sad that the individual decided to be an embarrassment for all eternity, but that's what the individual has become. But till Christ returns, there will be after effects of that reprobate's life. So we deal with the effects so that effects are limited, are hindered. So if the reprobate sexually molested a few people before he passed away, we decree and declare, and we go and look for the victims. Now the victims may not want to talk to us. I'm not telling us to bother them, but we go pray, decree, and declare on behalf of the victims, and we launch campaigns in the community to raise awareness of sexual abuse, what to do about it, and all that. So we take countermeasures to rectify the evil the reprobate has done in his lifetime. The absolute rectification will happen when Christ returns, but till then, we deal with the evil on the earth. That's how it goes, saints. So the whole idea, just let it all happen, we'll go to heaven anyway, it's not biblical, it's cowardice. Before I continue, do you understand what I've just explained? Let me know in the live chat. John understands this. Does the rest understand it also? Good. So here's the thing. If someone that passed away was a believer, at the resurrection will meet the believer again. And the believer will see the reward of their faithfulness to Christ, of the faithfulness by walking by faith. If the individual passed away was a reprobate, look, if someone died as a sinner without Christ at the resurrection, they'll be reprobates. Because the reprobation process will happen within seconds. If someone actually died as a reprobate, even during his lifetime, they're a reprobate at the resurrection. Anyway, if someone that passed away was a reprobate, we consider the feelings of the relatives by not only stating it directly, but we do have to admit, as believers or as saints, that was a reprobate. So what harm have they left behind for us to deal with? Because unless someone is born again and renewed in their mind, they leave pollution behind. So every human being that lived and who did not come to Christ, they end up spreading pollution as long as they're breathing. And once they pass, their bodies pass, once they pass away, that pollution is left and others will experience that pollution. That's facts. I'm dealing with facts here. Look, I'm a black man, okay? I've ancestry going back to Haiti. And the Haitians were the first black folks that whooped the ass of white supremacy. Napoleon sent his great navy. They shut it down. The Haitians inspired much slave rebellions all over the place. So I'm proud to be of Haitian descent. I am. And I also have other black ancestry also. But let's be frank here. Just because many of my ancestors were victimized during their lifetime, during the transatlantic slave trade, on the plantations, all of that, that doesn't mean that all of them ended up as good people. A lot of my ancestors were vandalized and raped. A lot of shitty stuff were done to them during the transatlantic slave trade. And while it all was happening, they realized that the only hope we have is God, and they turned into believers. But there also were many ancestors of mine who turned bitter and who became very, very dangerous people, taking out their bitterness on other blacks. So during slavery, there were blacks that became bitter and they took it out on other blacks just to feel bad about themselves. So some of my ancestors likely were reprobates, bad people, carrying demons as long as they lived. So I have no allegiance to them whatsoever. I never knew them and I will never know them either. I don't even want to know them if they died without Christ. Especially them in the condition they were in. They had no reason to refuse Christ. And why I'm saying that is because your reprobate ancestors, if there were some in it, they pass on pollution onto you. When people think of inheritance, they think about a plot of land, a sum of money, or some business. But here's the thing, every human being has an inheritance that they get from their ancestors. One inheritance is your first name, how you were named by your parents, your native language. All those are part of your inheritance, your heritage. When you grow up somewhere, you speak the native language of the community, and it's all based on past events. The language you speak was developed over time. The country you grew up in was developed over time. So everyone has an inheritance that they get from their ancestors. And look at this. Reprobate people leave pollution as inheritance to their descendants. And unless the descendants deal with the pollution of their ancestors, they'll be trapped by the same conflicts their ancestors went through. That's how it goes. There's nothing wrong with you speaking the language of your ancestors, or you receive some practical daily knowledge of them, like how to do farming, how to do fishing, how to do this and or that. But if you have ancestors who are reprobates, or worse, even devil worshippers, make sure that you go through your deliverance process so that negative tension that they've left behind does not cling onto you. So as saints, we don't speak ill of the dead. We make reports of the dead. That's what we do. That's what we do. We make reports about them. And we keep it factual and truthful. That does not mean that we don't have empathy nor sympathy for the survivors. Okay? We do withhold information which is too shocking for people to handle. We do that because we consider the living. But hey, if someone that passed away was a dangerous creep, was a menace to our species, we need to admit it. Because if we don't admit it, we won't be able to rectify the pollution they left behind. And when we don't do that, we end up enabling that pollution and perpetrating it into the next generations. And that's why there's so many, that's why, for example, in the black community is quite broad. You have the blacks in the United States called Afro-Americans, you have the blacks in the Caribbean, you have the blacks in Latin America, and the blacks in Brazil are called the Afro-Brazilians. Then you also have the Africans in general, but you also have Afro people in Asia. Also, the black community is quite big. But I'm referring now to the African diaspora in the half-western hemisphere. So when I say black community, I mean the African diaspora into the United States, mainly, especially those that are descendants of the transatlantic, of the slave to transatlantic slave trade. Look, there's a reason why in the black community there's so much dysfunction and so much self-hatred. It is because the coonery amongst us, we recognize it, we are against it, we don't take it, but we fail to realize that coons are always traitors from within. A traitor can never be someone from afar. Only someone this close can betray you. So the cooning amongst blacks has been going on even before transatlantic slave trade. We fail to realize that it's often our own people, relatives, who are in on it. Yes, I'm speaking about Judeans. Okay? So when I say the black community, I'm talking about the Judeans here, not the Hamites. And look at this. If you're from an Afro-Judean ancestry, by the transatlantic slave trade, you are from that descent. If you're from that descent, listen to what I'm saying here. If you have parents that used to beat you when you were a child, that's something they learned from their slave masters. The slave masters of our ancestors used to beat us to discipline us. And many of our ancestors took over this way of disciplining and they began to put it on their children. That's where this whole idea of beating your children comes from. White folks in general forbade this because we realize this is out of hand. But still in the black community, among Judeans, we tend to accept this. And when if a parent turns to a reprobate and they don't repent of the child abuse they conducted, what needs to happen is when that parent passes away, the children must mourn the loss of their parents as well as mourning the loss of what could have been, and they need to dedicate themselves. This is not continuing. No more beating of children. We're going to learn to communicate with children and communicate with adults in a constructive way. That's what needs to happen. And in the black community, because we firmly believe in don't speak ill of the dead, which again is a Greek philosophy, we need to put it in context. Of course, you're not going to slander the dead because why would you do that? We only cause pollution. We're not going to exploit someone's dying just to release our frustrations. Of course, we're not going to do that. But if those that passed away contributed harm on us, we must be delivered from it. And this, we sabotage our own healing, both as individuals and as a collective, by faking as if the individual that passed away was a saint. Look, if someone that passed away was a believer, then at the resurrection, they'll be completely holy and clean. Okay? But still, they became born again at some point during their lifetime. So before they became born again, they caused pollution. And when they became born again, many of them were not renewed in their mind. So even after becoming born again, some of them still operate in some pollution. So even if the individual who passed away was a believer in Christ, who was saved, they still had some pollution likely that they caused. And if that pollution harmed you, face it. Because by facing it, you now can heal and process it. What happens in the black community often is that we don't face the defects of those that pass away. And by doing that, we sabotage our own healing and our own futures. Do you understand what I just explained? Let me know in the live chat. John, understand this. Does the rest understand it also? Let me know in the live chat. So, if, for example, you have a woman who's a witch, and she was a bitter witch during her lifetime, and she used to verbally abuse all her children. One of those children was a daughter, and the daughter never dared to speak against her mom. And the mother passed away. That daughter is carrying trauma with her. And unless she faces how horrible her mother was, she can never heal, and she ends up either becoming just like her mother, or she ends up being an enabler of evil for the rest of her lives. And she will indirectly harm her children if she ends up becoming an enabler. In any way, she will cause harm to her own offspring and to the people around her if she does not process what was done to her by that mother of hers. And let's say that you have a believer that passes away, but the believer still had issues that were not resolved. The children has to face, okay, our father was a believer, he'll be resurrected, he's saved, that's fine, but he had issues, and we need to face that he had issues that he was not delivered from. So you know what? If you're a believer, get delivered as soon as possible, because if you're not delivered, you're going to carry issues, and those issues can be used by Satan as a leverage. So admit that, okay, it's a believer that passed away, but still Satan had a leverage over his believer because his believer was not delivered. We need to be able to assess the dead practically. Look, when believers pass away, we assess them, saying, okay, this brother or sister passed away. Were they delivered? Yes, okay. How they delivered? Let's use their story as a legacy to inspire others. If they were not delivered, then we need to use their life as a lesson so that we can teach other believers to get deliverance as soon as possible to become Christ-centered. That's what we do with believers. If someone was an unbeliever that passed away, so they're a reprobate at resurrection, then we need to learn from that history so that we can prevent similar things in the future. We have to rightfully assess the dead. It's easier to assess the dead close to us in our lifetime. For example, your father or grandfather or great-grandfather, those that are still in your lifespan, because if someone passed away centuries ago, it will be a bit more difficult to assess them. It is possible, but it will be a bit more difficult. So we need to do that, because if, for example, Kwa here, says in the live chat, he said, essentially, my dad used to beat my mom and even tried to light her on fire when I was a kid, but my brother thinks this man was a saint. Kwa, your brother is mentally ill. And hey, I'm saying to you as it is. I deal with facts here. Your brother is mentally ill. Why am I saying that? If he witnessed the same violence you did, and when a child witnesses violence like that, it affects them mentally. So the fact alone that he also witnessed this as a child causes mental illness in him. So he needs to go into therapy to process this. But here's the thing, he is sabotaging his own healing and his own life by not facing what that man really is. And by doing that, demons now have a hold on him. So Kwa, I'm telling you, your brother may not be a bad guy, but he may even be a believer, I'm not sure. But even if he's a believer, he is sabotaging himself. So I would recommend you to lower contact with him. Okay. So, look, we have to assess the debt, but it's not I want to tell you. You may not assess the debt, especially not the debt of your own people, but the world does. Okay, let me give an example to you. The Judeans, or the African diaspora that's been trafficked through the slave trade, their descendants, of which I'm a part also. Look, what happened to the Judeans during the transatlantic slave trade? The world placed their shadows on us and enacted all their dirt on us. It wasn't just white folks from Europe doing it. Arabs joined them. You had Coonish Judeans that joined them. You had Hamites tribes that joined them. Yeah, Hamites were done dirty also, but in the beginning they joined them. You had the natives in the Americas joining them. You had Asians eventually also joining them. So the world as a whole were in on it. So we had nowhere to go. And this happened over and over again. We were publicly sodomized, publicly beaten, whipped, degraded, and all of that. Look, when a population is traumatized to such an extent, it will have an effect on their descendants. Psychologically, socially, financially, spiritually, it will have an effect on all levels. For example, the people that lived in the Netherlands in 1944, they were traumatized heavily when the Nazis removed the food supplies from the Netherlands. Okay? So when the Dutch population, they don't want to comply with killing the Ashkenazi Jews, what happened was the Nazi party decided to remove the food supplies from the Netherlands. So when the winter came, there was no food. So a lot of folks died, some turned to cannibalism, and some women that were pregnant almost lost their babies, and a lot of Dutch folks turned on each other just to remain alive. It was very traumatic. And a little later, you had Moroccans that came and fought against the Nazis, and they liberated much of the Netherlands. And many Moroccans died while doing this. But the Muslim participation in the fight against the Nazis is seldom discussed by Dutch people. They don't want to hear about it. Instead, like to shit and dump on Moroccans in Dutch society. But okay, that's their racism. But anyway, in 1944, this trauma caused a trauma bond that bonded the Dutch people as a unit, but it also caused a lot of fright in the population. That's why in Dutch culture, you had this attitude that emerged culturally that don't get too comfortable when things go well, because if you can lose it at any time. So Dutch folks were taught this self-sabotage to sabotage your own happiness because it can be taken away from you anytime. Where did they get this self-sabotaging, depressive, nihilistic attitude from? It comes from 1944. Now, the people that were born after 1944 never went through 1944, but they experienced the traumatic shock of their parents who went through it and the relatives. And when they got children, they transferred right onto their children. So that's how collectively the people in the Netherlands were affected by 1944. And the migrants that moved to the Netherlands and became part of the culture also shared in the shock. So if only one season of hunger affected the Dutch population for generations afterwards, what do you think that centuries of not only slavery, but financial and social oppression has done to black folks? Come on. So here's the thing. The people of today who are not racist, who are not into all of that, they know that the descendants of blacks today, they suffer psychologically about what happened to their ancestors. So if you are a black individual, let's say in the United States, and you want to start your own business, then it may likely be that the bank doesn't want to give you a loan for your business if your ideas are good. You know why? Because the business owners, who are often Freemasons, they know how human beings work. The Freemasons who run the bank realized, he's from the black community. And the trauma, the post-traumatic stress collectively of slavery and the Jim Crow era is still afflicting blacks today. So if this black guy opens his own business and is successful, likely other blacks will turn on him and he will be dead very soon. So you know what? Let's not give him a loan, because if we give him a loan and he ends up dying, it will be also bad for our business. So those pagan businessmen, they pay attention to your ancestors. They assess the debt to check how the descendants are, because the descendants are a fruit of the debt that lived before. So if the descendants are a fruit of the ancestors who passed away, assess their ancestors, then you'll see what type of people you're dealing with today. The reason why the state of Maine in the United States has so many white folks is because in the past, many English migrants moved over there. So because their ancestors were English migrants that fled over there, that's why their descendants are white over there. That's why they speak English in a warm way. Why? Because that place is the closest to Britain, geographically speaking. So when you understand the ancestors, you will understand the type of people you're dealing with today. Or if an area was subjected to a tyrannical regime somewhere in the 19th century, and that tyrannical regime left a lot of trauma behind, then you know that the descendants of today from that area will face certain issues more than people from other areas. John Wonder, thank you well for your super chat donations, really much appreciated. Thank you very much. So understand this. Pagan businessmen and the governments in the world, they assess your ancestors to judge what they're dealing with today, which is you. And here's the thing, they're practical in doing so. But often we do not assess our ancestors properly. And by doing that, we set ourselves up to walk in the same conflicts they walk through. It's not the same situation because we're living in different times, but it's the same conflict. That's why you have marital conflicts that are reproduced in later generations. You have financial difficulties that are reproduced. You have sicknesses that are reproduced in families. You may have a family, and almost everyone in that family suffers from cancer or from some liver disease or some type of biological difficulty. Or you may have a family, and everyone in that family is broke all the time. They have no money. Even when they get money, money just kind of escapes from them. So they are alive, they have children, they get older, the children get older, but they're always broke. Or you may have a family where everyone feels betrayed all the time. So they can't resolve conflict. Now, when you look at those people, those households, and you would look at their past, you would realize that there was one big traumatic event that wasn't processed. So listen what I'm saying to you. All societal violence out there are the result of past tragedies that were not processed. If a tragedy is not processed, it will turn into a bitter wound that will afflict the community. Again, write this down in live chat, note this down. A tragedy that's not processed will become a bitter wound that will haunt future generations. A tragedy that's not processed will turn into a bitter wound that will haunt future generations. I'll wait till you've noted in live chat. It's very important. I'll wait till you've noted it down in the live chat for me. Because it's something you need to remember. Indeed, just like Justin has noted down, a tragedy that's not processed will haunt future generations. Well summarized. And many of you have experienced difficulties in your life that was not your fault, nor the fault of your parents directly, but it was the result. It was the result of past tragedies that maybe have happened 50 or maybe 80 years ago, maybe sometimes even 200 years ago. Tragedies that have not been processed properly. Where there was a famine that killed a lot of people, or a flood that made people go missing, or a sudden loss of land, or it was an independence movement that caused trouble. And here's the thing, Latin America, that means all from Mexico all the way to all the Hispanic countries, they suffer generational curses of the betrayal that happened during independence from Spain. First of all, most of the people were not even in favor of independence from Spain to begin with. It was the Catholic Church and the white supremacists who wanted independence from Spain to keep black people down and to retain their hold financially on the masses. So this betrayal towards the Spanish Americans and all the civil wars and the trauma that came from it is haunting Latin America till this day. So unless Hispanic people face the white supremacy as well as the pagan Christianity as the root of the independence conflicts that is haunting until this day, there will be no recovery. During independence from Spain, many tragedies happened. Many harmful things were done during those civil wars in Spanish America. And all those conflicts are playing out till this day. That's why Latin America is haunted by drug cartels, is haunted by criminal gangs. It's why it's haunted by urban violence, a lot of violence against women with unstable governments. It's in a cycle of poverty because of the post-colonial of the independence traumas that are not processed. Quad, thank you very much for your super chat donations. Very much appreciated. Thank you very much. And here's the worst thing about it. When it comes to Latin America, many Hispanics don't even know their history. So they face a lot of hardship, a lot of harm in the present, and they don't know why they face all those issues. For example, there was this Nicaraguan tourist here in Korea. I spoke to her in Spanish. My Spanish was quite fluent with her. Of course, she has a dialect a little bit of Nicaragua, but we understood one another. And I began to talk to her about the Kingdom of Guatemala, which was the whole of Central America under Spanish rule. She was not aware that her country, Nicaragua, used to be a Spanish province, part of Guatemala. She was not aware of it. She was shocked. So I shared her some Wikipedia page which contained some historical sources, and she was shocked. Whoa, we were part of Guatemala? We were part of a kingdom? You know what? I had a facepalm moment thinking, huh? How come people from Nicaragua are not aware of how their country was formed? Nicaragua was a Spanish province that later became a republic. But it was a part of another sub-country, the Kingdom of Guatemala, which became independent as the Federal Republic of Central America, which later fell apart in 1842. I mean, look, Nicaragua has been haunted by a lot of internal unrest, some of which you can feel till this day in Nicaraguan society. Where this all originates? On the 15th of September, 1821, the Captain General or Spanish governor of the Kingdom of Guatemala suddenly declared independence, together with a few other politicians, without consulting the masses. So in the province of Nicaragua, which was in the south, the people heard, what? Did this guy declare independence? No, we're not part of this. So the province of Nicaragua separated from Guatemala, saying we remain with Spain. But then the politician said, you know what, we're going to undo the independence declaration, don't worry, so they rejoined Guatemala again. And before you know it, the junta in Guatemala City sold the country to the Mexicans, and the Mexicans took over and plundered the whole of Central America, including Nicaragua. It was a big trauma. Nicaragua felt like an orphan. The people felt abandoned. And after the Mexican Empire collapsed in 1823, Nicaragua felt betrayed by everyone, the population, but they decided, you know what, we are continuing with Guatemala as a federal republic. We're going to solidify a relationship with Spain again. Things going to work out better. It didn't. So Nicaragua eventually left the Union in 1838 and in 1842. Actually, it's 1841 it was made official. 1842 was the first year that the Central American Union was gone. And Nicaragua, till this day, suffers and is afflicted by harm caused by those independence conflicts and the sense of being abandoned. But many Nicaraguan people don't know this. So they think if we vote for this politician, it's going to get better. Or if we vote for that politician, it's going to be good. So they're fighting symptoms over and over again, generation after generation, and they don't deal with the root of it. This stronghold of feeling abandoned like an orphan is what's behind it. So that's why it's important to know history, not because you're living in the past, but because you can process the history. Hispanic people have not processed their chaotic and treacherous independence from Spain. They never did it. Lady Simon, thank you for being here. Goed dat je hier bent en mooi dat je het Heren volgt. Prijs God. So that's why we need to process things. That's why this attitude, don't speak ill of the dead, unless we put it in a Christ-centered context, it ends up becoming a bondage for us, because we need to address the ill things of the dead, so that their pollution does not haunt us nor our posterity. So, do you understand now why we need to assess and examine those that pass away, especially those close to our lifespan? Let me know in the live chat. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. And here's the thing. What a public refuses to process is doomed to become the future. Write this down over for yourself. Whatever a public refuses to process is doomed to become the future. I'll wait till you've noted in the live chat. Whatever a public refuses to process is doomed to become the future. I'll wait. And that's happening worldwide now. It happens in the United States, it happens in Europe, it happens also in Australia, it happens in Asia also, it happens all over the place. Tragedies that were not processed are now become the future. Whatever a public, Kwa said whatever a republic. Oh, it's funny you said republic instead of public, Kwa. Probably you misunderstood what I said, but republic is not even a natural construct for human beings to live under. I already explained that in another video and also in a live stream. We are designed to be led by kingly figures, by households. The human species is designed to be a universal household led by top quality households. That's how we're designed. So royal houses or noble houses is how we're supposed to be led and guided, with the Heavenly Father as the king above us. Don't worry, Kwa, but the misspelling worked for good. So I can explain this again. Republics were a Greek experiment. Even the ancient Greeks were faded. That's why all those republics out there, all those countries who are republics, they are a repetition of the fall of the Roman Republic, not Empire, Roman Republic. And the Roman Republic, man, it fell in a very disastrous way. And the same will happen to every country that's a republic today. The French have their 5th republic, I believe now. Because the republic never worked for the French, and it will never will. Anytime you install something that goes against the build of the human being, it will fail, sooner or later. So, everyone you encounter today out there, whether someone from Zimbabwe or someone from Suriname, someone from Chile or someone from Canada or North Korea, whoever you encounter, they are the fruit of their ancestors. And they are the cycles of their ancestors, the conflict of the ancestors are following them, unless they become born again. That's the fact. So if you know something about the history of a place, you can predict how the people are. Now, some of the people are delivered, or some of the people are a bit different, but those are exceptions. In general, people conform to the community around them, and the community around them follows the patterns of the past. So the way to be truly delivered and free in this world is to be wise. Realize you're dealing with a world population that's operating in the past, and they don't even know where they're operating in the past. Their children will operate in the past, and they will continue to operate in the past till Christ returns. Only few of our species throughout the generations will actually operate in the present. Most people just operate in the past, and they're not even aware they're doing it. So to realize that about most people you encounter, the moment you realize this, you will avoid a lot of disappointment. When you expect people to be fully in the present, not realizing that most people out there are operating in the past, you are set up to face a lot of disappointment and a lot of heartache. Realize that most people operate in the past. Most people are. It may be very absurd that I'm saying this, but that's the fact of the matter. There are even believers operating in the past together with the world, and they should not be so. It's those that are renewed in their minds who walk by power and operate in the present. So again, most people operate in the past. You want to know what type of past they're operating in? Check the history of either their family or check the history of the place they grew up in, of the country where they're from. Check the history of the country or their place, or check the history. If there are Irish migrants that moved to the United States, check the history of Ireland. And check the history of the US state where they grew up in. Then you'll figure out what type of past they're in. Unless someone is renewed in their mind, walk in the power of the Spirit, they're operating in the past, one way or the other. So all of us used to operate in the past, not realizing that was what we were doing. Again, there is no moving on in the sense of moving forward in the world. There's only continuation of the cycle. For us who are born again and renewed our minds, we don't operate in the cycle, we operate in the present. And when you operate in the present, I'm telling you, you avoid 90% of all the dangers out there. Because all the danger out there in the world amongst human beings is the past that's playing out over and over again in later generations. But when you're delivered from the past because you're renewed in your mind, now you are able to move better, to make better decisions. For example, let's say that you come from backgrounds where people married quite young. Okay, let's say you're from Poland. Or you're from the Netherlands, okay? Or let's say you're from the Netherlands, okay? And amongst your people, for centuries, women used to marry at age 20 or 21, 22. And used to have babies at a very young age. Since the 1960s, this kind of changed. Women get babies at a later age. And you're a Dutch woman also. And you realize that in your own native language, women are not called wives, but women. In Dutch, you say, dit is mijn vrouw. You don't say, dit is mijn wijf. The word wife is similar to the English word wife. But in Dutch society, you never say, this is my wife. You say, this is my woman. But maybe if you're a Dutch woman, you never realize why aren't wives called wives openly? Now you realize there may be some sexual trauma that's not processed collectively over here. And then you look at your mother, your grandmother, your aunties, and all of that, and realize that they all have this sexual discomfort in their attitude that they think is noble. So then you think, okay, I can't help it that the word wife has turned into a negative word in the Dutch culture, but I can unlearn this sexual discomfort that society praises as something good. And by seeing that, and by stepping out of that pattern, you've avoided likely a divorce, or you've avoided being stuck with a narcissistic husband, or you've avoided diseases, you've avoided a lot. When you're freed from the cycle of time, you're able to make far better decisions than anyone around you. So consider that. Now, that's why sometimes it's important to have outsiders to check at you. Because often outsiders will see things much quicker than you do. Outsiders can see things far quicker than you do. Maybe you want to figure out what goes on. And it may take you years to figure out what goes on, but an outsider comes and sees immediately, this is what goes on. And there's another thing. It's not just in the Dutch language that they don't use the word wife. Also in Portuguese there is not even a word for a married woman. Marido is, you say, a married man, but there is no word in Portuguese for a married woman. That is because Latin was the spoken language in the kingdom of Portugal, which was later referred into Portugal. And in Latin, the Latin was the language of the Romans, and the Romans, just like the ancient Greeks, did not value women that much. So this misogyny is also traced back in the Portuguese language. There is no word for a married woman. And were Portuguese natives from Portugal that taught me this. And when I look at it, well, there is none. So you have languages where you have a word for wife, but it's not used, because the word for wife, just like in Dutch, has become this negative word that people want to avoid. Why? Unprocessed historical trauma that affects the population. So even in the language that people use, you can trace back historical conflicts. So that's all for this live stream. Again, my live streams are not that long because I want you to be able to play them back and make notes. Assess your ancestors. Assess the dead. Don't go and speak ill of them to relieve yourself, but also don't sugarcoat the dead either. Assess the dead so that you can deal with the present more effectively. Well, that's it for now. Keep on agreeing with Christ and be at peace.